We'll go over strategies on how to memorize the information. There are many ways to memorize information, some of which I will discuss below in no specific order. It is best to see what method works for you, as one method may work for someone but not for the other. First is understanding concepts and principles. Once you understand the principles, it becomes much easier to apply the knowledge and reduces the need to memorize. For example, in biochemistry, there is a concept of post-translational modification process that immature proteins, or what are called proproteins, such as proinsulin, which later becomes insulin, these immature proteins go through a modification process in order to become mature and active. After the proteins have been formed during the process of translation, they undergo modification processes which are called trimming and covalent alterations. Trimming involves the removal of immature proteins from N or C terminals of amino acid chains, and covalent alterations involve the addition of covalent groups such as phosphate, sugars, hydroxyl, methyl, acetyl groups to the proteins. So once we know this concept of post-translational modification, we can apply it to proteins in the human body or proteins produced by a virus. Both types of proteins undergo the same process. So instead of individually trying to memorize each protein and its immature and mature forms, one can just understand this concept and apply it to many types of proteins. Scientists then take it a step further and apply this concept by targeting viral post-translational modification processes with drugs to stop the production of viral proteins, resulting in the control of a viral infection. So if you're asked about this concept in an exam, you can apply it to any protein mentioned in the question without having to memorize individual examples of many proteins. Next is spaced repetition. This method involves reviewing the information you study at set intervals, be it after a couple of hours or a couple of days. Typically, it is recommended to review information at day 1, 3, 7, 10, and 20 to reinforce the material in order to ingrain in the memory. Next is memory palace. This technique entails creating an imaginary location where you place a certain set of information you want to memorize at specific locations. Companies like Sketchy Medical, Picmonic, Pixarize for biochemistry have really utilized this technique to help students memorize details within the field of medicine, which traditionally relied heavily on rote memorization. Creating visual stories and animations can help students retain information very well. Next is writing notes from your own understanding. Writing has long been known to enhance memory. However, transcribing notes from a lecture may not be very helpful. It is recommended to write notes based on your own understanding. Next is making questions. Creating problem-based questions as you go through the study material can help you not only prepare for exams, but also fill in the knowledge gap that you may not be aware of. Hence, answering the why questions as you go along can solidify your knowledge. Next up is creating flashcards. Reviewing information repeatedly is known to help memorize, and creating flashcards with questions often help students remember as well. It works for some, but it doesn't work for everyone. It depends. Key is you want to create your own flashcards, not just copy or download somebody else's flashcards. Next is building connections and hooks. Creating connections and hooks help to learn processes. Using the order of information as a hook for memory may also help you memorize. Then, integrating knowledge. As mentioned earlier, integrating information across different fields of sciences often helps solidify the understanding of concepts and their principles as well. Making patterns. Certain rules and patterns can be applied generally and reduce the need to memorize individual facts. I will share some examples of patterns seen in the human body. For example, tendons connect muscles to bone, while ligaments connect bone with another bone. Shorter muscles lie deeper, while longer muscles are superficial. While learning the nomenclature of neural motor and sensory pathways will make one realize that the origin of pathway is named first and the end is named last. For example, corticospinal tract or the pathway starts from cerebral cortex in the brain and travels down to the spinal cord, while spinothalamic pathway originates in spinal cord and goes all the way up to the thalamus in the brain. Similarly, in histology of human body, you can notice that all the surfaces that require extra roughness or that go through like the tough environment, for example, your skin, your oral mucosa, or certain junctions in the human body, they have squamous epithelial cells, which are known to be more rough and tough and protective in nature, while the columnar epithelium is more for producing hormones, and they are more found in glands. Additionally, if you notice something happening repeatedly, try to note it down and utilize it as well. For example, in genetics, we often see these pedigrees showing the transmission of disease from parents to their children that are often difficult to comprehend in the beginning. However, once we see the pattern in them, they become easy to understand. And here is a pattern that I recognized. So first is you want to check to see if the pedigree skips generation. If yes, then that's typically autosomal recessive. If not, then consider it autosomal dominant. Next is, are one or both the parents affected? If yes, then autosomal dominant. And if no, then it's autosomal recessive or sporadic parental mutation. Then look for if there is there father to son transmission. If yes, then it's autosomal dominant. If no, then it's X-linked dominant. Then also notice, are only male affected? Then consider it X-linked recessive. So these are some examples of patterns that I've noticed in the field of medicine. I highly encourage you to look for these patterns and create a list of your own. Next is chunking, which involves breaking down large pieces of information in smaller chunks, which is another technique often used to memorize phone numbers or names of medications. So that can be helpful as well. Next is categorizing or grouping using a commonality. And this is something I mentioned earlier as well, that memorizing a lengthy list of things can be daunting. Finding commonalities within and categorizing and grouping the things to remember in the list is very helpful. For example, if there are multiple risk factors for a disease, try to find out a common thing among them that helps connect all those risk factors. For example, there's a condition called Ogilvy syndrome, which is a pseudo or a false obstruction of large intestine. Causes of this syndrome include low electrolytes, surgery, opioid medications, anticholinergic medications. All of these causes have one thing in common though, that is slowing the gut motility due to abnormality in the autonomic nervous system controlling the movement of intestinal muscles. And so once we can group all those causes in one possible scientific explanation, then we'll only need to learn that one reason and we'll be able to think of the entire list of things that may be causing this disease condition. Another concept is applying concepts in real-life situations. This is another way to memorize. Applying information in real-life situations can help retain information for long-term. And I've experienced that personally myself. Earlier, I gave an example of applying the concept of viral post-translational modifications and targeting it with medications that can stop these post-translational modification processes, resulting in reduction of viral load and ultimately controlling the viral infection. Next strategy to memorize is creating mnemonics. Mnemonic is a word, a phrase, an abbreviation, a poem, or a visual imagery that may help relate the information you're trying to memorize. For example, you can memorize the names of muscles innervated by radial nerve using our best mnemonic. R for radial nerve, B for brachioradialis muscle, E for extensor muscles, and S for supinators, and T for triceps. Next strategy is using clues. If you have a group of similar things or diseases to memorize, try to look for clues that differentiate one from the other. Develop mnemonics or memory hooks to remember those clues. Next strategy is to create frameworks and mind maps. Building a framework or a skeleton or a flowchart for a topic or a process may help give a learner an overview. It is recommended to first map out a topic and then fill in details. Building frameworks and mind maps helps solidify your knowledge and improve the visualization of the topic. And last but not the least, teaching. Teaching someone what you learn has been found to be a very effective way of learning and memorizing. It also helps to fill in any gaps in knowledge you may have when you're trying to explain a concept in a simple form. So these are some of the many memorization techniques that may help you memorize information so you can retain it for long term.